Hello, and welcome to Virtual Concert Hall's live music channel. My name is Chris Au, and I have with me the amazing Dr. Anna Ouspenskaya, and we'll be co-hosting today's show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be back on this journey, exploring even further with the Beethoven Symphonies narrated by Lawrence Rapchak.
Yes, and this is part 4 of the documentary on Beethoven's Symphony No. 4, written and narrated by Lawrence Rapchak, created by New Media Productions Worldwide and Virtual Concert Halls, and produced by Architects of Music.
Yeah, if you like numbers, 4 of 4. That's our chapter today.
Exactly. It's quite a mouthful, actually.
Yeah, to say. And this incredible collaboration is a blessing of my own career, venturing into film production with wonderful partners on this project. And thanks to our very shared passion for bringing musicians and music projects and events in real-time live events, film projects, and everything connected with music from around the globe.
I remember when I first learned this symphony. It was in the springtime. I had just turned 15 years old, and the dreamy, wistful, romantic feelings that usually surfaced around that time of year were really heightened by this exquisite second movement, the slow movement of this symphony, and its simple, intensely yearning main theme, which is essentially nothing but a descending scale in the key of E flat major, like so. With one note that reverses, but then it continues descending. That's all. What could be more basic than that? But with Beethoven, simplicity is often the basis for the sublime. And E flat major is now the tonic key of this movement. And you heard the lovely melody descending, and then it begins to ascend into the dominant key of B flat. But you may have also noticed that the texture wasn't entirely smooth and lyrical. The second violins were keeping time in a way, with a gentle but insistent clipped rhythm. Sort of a pulsation. More on that in a bit. Still, the overall character is so lovely. In fact, it recalls the popular Viennese serenade genre, which flourished under Mozart. The serenade for wind ensemble, so fashionable to accompany a late-night moonlit rendezvous under the balcony in the garden and whatnot. So often, serenades were in the mellow key of E flat major, which suited the wind instruments very well. For instance, this exquisite serenade by Mozart, which also begins with a descending scale melody in E flat major. But Beethoven's exquisite lyricism has a certain intensity to it, since that clipped rhythm that I mentioned is an essential part of the music. In fact, this second movement begins with an introductory measure of this rhythmic motive alone. And as the gorgeous main theme reaches its climax, it is crowned by this same rhythm, now played by the full orchestra, complete with trumpets and timpani and sounding very martial and majestic. So we have an unusual combination of exquisite romantic beauty and this insistent martial ceremonial fanfare motive. And that same martial rhythm now softens, and it almost breathes or pulsates along with our lovely melody. What is additionally significant here is that this martial rhythm has its own counterpart, like the opposite side of the coin. It's a very florid figure that's usually based on the tonic triad of E flat major, like so, which also crowns the main theme with its grandiose flourishes. This passage is very unusual. It's thrilling in the way that it sweeps you along with unison trumpets and timpani marking each beat. Yet it seems a little incongruous in the midst of this very serene and gentle music. And as the main theme continues to unfold, this florid motif develops right along with it. It embellishes the theme in the woodwinds like so. It's still very smooth and legato, but then it switches to a much livelier staccato. So we have this serene, lyrical main theme in combination with the martial rhythm, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, which then switches to this luxuriant flowing figure. And all of this creates a continual sense of motion and rhythmic vitality in the music. Here is the entire passage.
Well, I want to just pose a question to you, Dr. Anna, after hearing all that. What do you think is the purpose of having a second movement? Because we've done the Beethoven 5, we've done the Beethoven 6, and then we're doing Beethoven 4th Symphony, and I want to ask and pose a question as to what the purpose you think, maybe philosophically, because we were talking about that previously, what's the importance or the philosophical significance of a second movement?
You mean a second movement in general for
Sorry, like an adagio slow movement. Yes, adagio slow movement.
In general, it's part of any symphonic cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a awesome question. I love it. Well, of course, we can go into the history of how the symphony as a music form developed. It wasn't created. It developed over a course of a couple of centuries.
Yeah.
As a form which fit, the performance stage of the time and fits the expectations, frankly, of the audience, and also creates a sort of a grid for the composer to lay down their ideas for the large works, making a parallel with literature. It's certain parameters which make it a novel, as opposed to a short story or some other genre in literature. And just like in any narrative, you need to kind of look at the symphony as a whole, as a structure, as basically a grid for a particular type of narrative. Just like we were talking in the previous program about the grand scope of imagery and philosophy and history and all those elements being all channeled into one long symphonic production when the composer works on the symphony. So the composer kind of decides on what they're going to write, obviously, before they put the first note on the paper. And, symphonies are larger works, take longer time, so usually composers don't write them on napkins. They plan it ahead of time and they prepare materials just like writers of the novels. When I was a kid, I was so fascinated with writing and language and all of that, no less than with the music. And in my naive 9-year-old, I thought, okay, well, you write a novel like this, you open a notebook and you start writing it and they just keep going. And that's, it's a kind of childish perception of it, which, a lot of people carry into the adulthood and unless they try to write a novel. So, but if you do, then you find out that's not how people write a novel. They create a general idea and then they collect materials for it, in multiple notebooks. And then they sketch the characters, then they sketch a plot of the story, and then they put it all together. And the actual writing of the words of the novel come as the last stage of creating a novel. Same with the symphony. Now back to the slow movement. The simple answer of it is any piece of art needs to represent real life, otherwise it's going to be unrelatable. And of course, one of the very big and important aspects of life, which we all live through, is variety and contrast.
Yeah.
So we every day or every month, if you look, if we compare a symphony to one person's year of life, if you just look back at the past year of your life, you'll have a lot of contrast and a variety of events that happened in there. And some of them will be turbulent, some of them will be romantic, dramatic, tragic, painful, and some of them will be philosophical, kind of inward moments of maybe self-searching, however people call it. Some people call it prayer, other people call it meditation, whatever you call it. But those inward moments of calm, maybe calm in terms of physical and other activities, not flying the air, flights from between different countries, but just being physically reserved, but being inwardly very active and going in depth in oneself, and searching for some deep philosophical answers or maybe moral answers, whatever they are. So I would say the slow movement of any symphony is the representation of that deep inward look into the emotional and various emotions and exploring them in depth. That's
that's a fantastic answer to my question. Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it's a chance for the composer to really expose and express his inner self as a musician, as an artist. And it's also a way for us to also dive into that. I really think, for example, you have a composer like Schubert and his second movements, and you compare it to perhaps Beethoven and his second movements, and even as early as in his Opus 7 piano sonata, there's his second movement in there where you see this. It's representative of something much later, where there's like a philosophical, universal way in which he expands time and space, and it really reveals the inner self of the composer. You have certain slower movements, perhaps, of a Chopin sonata, which again are very, very different. And they all sort of serve to, as you say, express what's inwardly perhaps troubling them, because the outer movements tend to have a bit more of that extroverted, striving, moving forward, and brighter perhaps energy that is intended to draw the audience in. It's like, okay, come on, let's go on an adventure together. But then during this adventure, you have to take some time, and there's the moonlit night, and you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about. And I think that's why it's quite significant. No, I really love that answer. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So, and the slow movements, as a professional musician, slow movements usually make me feel like I'm touching something really significant and really also very intimate about the composer.
Right.
And one of the very hard things for any performer is to find the right tempo for the slow movement, because it needs to have that sense of slow motion or no motion at all, because they're not the outer motion, which is the focus of the slow movements usually, but the inner workings, the inner emotions, and the devil is in the details in there. So slow movements pose a very particular challenge. And a lot of times people say, well, it requires maturity to play slow movements. Not necessarily. Some young musicians are really able to connect with it. It's just reflectiveness, and it requires from the artists just that inclination to self-reflection and to just quieting everything out and being with yourself, and that's what the slow movements are. And some of them have a very laconic, very limited amount of material in there, and it's following that small, seemingly insignificant changes, nuances. It's very nuanced. Yep.
It's also a chance, I find, to it's a challenge for the performer technically as well, not to dive too much into the details of it, because it differs depending on which instrument you play. But the kind of touch, the kind of approach you have to the notes, that kind of attention to detail, as you said, but also the expressivity of the note changes. A certain legato phrase or a certain staccato or a certain accompaniment, just like in this symphony with the accompaniment, it serves a different sort of purpose when you know that there's this descending theme that comes down. I mean, of course, there's this martial theme, but then this intensely yearning theme also comes in. And how do you balance that? How do you express that amongst the accompaniment? And I think that's wonderful. I've always really enjoyed playing and studying the slow movements of a piece. I find it's just a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, it's a journey. Every slow movement is a very special journey for musicians to really be able to connect on that level with the piece and with the audience, and not to be splashy and outgoing energy. A lot of less motion outside, more room for deeper movements inside. But then it needs to be so captivating in the performance moment that you don't lose your audience. The audience needs to be yearning instead of yawning.
yes, yearning and not yawning. The not intensely yawning theme comprised of a descending scale.
And when you have not much more than just the scale, and it's incredible how Beethoven really makes so much out of so little material in there. But it is a challenge for the listeners, for the audience to connect. But once you do, it's inviting that outer piece. And that ability to really go deep and maybe learn something eternal about ourselves.
Because it is connected to the outer movements in a philosophical or a narrative way. And I want to just end with a thought about the way we use silence, even in the slow movement, and the kind of rests that you use or the kind of breaths that you take. It's very different. I think also, just to put this further out, it's sort of like when you watch an opera and then you have all these outer movements of action or drama, and then there's like the solo arias or the duets. And then those silences, the accompaniment, the whole atmosphere changes. There's I think some of the most famous arias we know are slower arias, and and the operas that follow it. It's this really, like you said, a call to be introspective, and when we do that, we find our inner humanity, and it's sometimes a lot more beautiful than we believe, or tragic than we ever thought possible. And I think I think it's one of the most beautiful things of our art, that we get to suddenly dive into these sort of slow movements, and because of the lack of words spoken, everybody can bring in their own yearning, perhaps.
Yeah. That's a great way to put that. And with this, we reluctantly are going to say goodbye to this slow movement. And the next program will be dedicated again to Beethoven in action. And,
Absolutely. And that's, we want to give a big hand to our team and our collaborators for making all these films and documentaries happen. New Media Productions, Virtual Concert Halls, Architects of Music, and of course the amazing narration of Lawrence Rapchak. I think we've spent so many episodes just praising him that hopefully he realizes how amazing he is, and he'll continue to do more for us to enjoy.
Yep. And hopefully Larry Rapchak has, I know he has a lot of plans, so hopefully he'll get the support to produce more of such narratives. These are, I dare say, these are classics.
Yes.
Like, some stories, some books just make it eternal, timeless, and this is timeless, just like the greatest music by Beethoven. And I want to also invite everyone to check out more events and productions coming from virtual concert halls and from progressive musicians, from Sound Espressiva and Call Orchestra. We have a season filled with events, and we're bringing a lot of richness from musicians around the entire world. Join us for Music and Musicians from Around the World daily show, and bring your own art, your own ideas, your own projects to us. We are here. We're a growing community of artists and art supporters from around the entire world, and we are here to present your projects. Get in touch with us, and let's talk about what we can do together.
These shows are usually very exciting, and we get to learn something, and you get to showcase your art and your knowledge and your insights. And with that, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time for part 5 of our Beethoven 4 documentary series. See you next time.
Bye.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Espressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.